Speaking of all things sport and how we can utilise it in the world of business, Karen Gately is a sensei from Corporate Dojo and joins us now. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Yeah, and I guess the lessons of sport so important in terms of business and mentality as well.
Absolutely. As you well know, our primary focus is on bringing those lessons from the martial arts into the world of business. And, in my experience, what is absolutely aligned is the strength of our character, whether it is in the world of business or whether it's in the dojo or kickboxing ring or, football field, is what ultimately decides the extent to which we apply our talent.
Yeah.
So I know as a martial artist that kicking and punching is one level of capability, but in fact the ability to remain focused, to be courageous, to choose to make a disciplined decision, for example.
Take the drama out of it.
Yeah, and that dictates whether or not it ultimately benefits me.
Now, I want to talk to you today about racism when it comes to employment. Hard to believe that it's still happening. You can imagine that there is covert racism, but overt racism in a day-to-day era like today seems to be quite bizarre. There's a story doing the rounds on news.com.au about a South Yarra organisation which put up an ad saying no dark-skinned people, referring to Africans and Indians. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, absolutely. My first thought is this still happening? This is outrageous. Then I reflected on why is this still happening? And you can well imagine the conversation that's gone on within people's minds, but also amongst themselves around, we've got a difficult customer, the customer's racist, the customer doesn't want a home care person.
Could be an elder, yes.
Exactly.
And you do hear it a lot when it comes to
different generations.
Retirement villages where they say, I don't want to be touched by these people.
That's right. So as a society, what we're accepting is certain portions of our community are allowed to get away with it because, hey, they've always thought that way, they've always behaved that way. What's the point of arguing with them now? But I encourage those people to really think deeply about, say for example, your child was excited about a job opportunity, put their hand up or read the ad and then realised the only reason they're not allowed to go for it is because of the colour of their skin. If we really think about from an empathetic point of view, what the candidate market's view of this would be, then surely we can see the pain that's caused to that kind of advertising. So, I do think the law allows for positive discrimination or exemptions around certain aspects of discrimination law. So if you're a service provider that, absolutely has particular needs in this regard, then go and fight that out. Go and get your lawfully acknowledged
I think
exemption.
of a modelling agency, right? So I think that, for example, if you are doing a certain colour makeup, then you're going to look for the skin tones of the certain type of makeup that you sell, right? Because that might be that you've gone for the majority audience as opposed to going for the dark skin audience, for example. So therefore, if you were looking for a model, then that would be the model you would be looking for. That's me as a journalist always trying to find an exemption to the rule. Of course, that's the problem with who we are. But in most professions, do you think it's still something that people think about, that they see a difference between two people based on the colour of their skin?
Well, we saw again last week in the news a young guy in Bondi let go from his job. His boss said to him, look, the reality is the locals are a bit racist and the locals like their coffee in a certain way, made by a certain person, and that's that white guy over there. So, again, that...
It's not always white versus dark, though, is it? Because I have friends who are definitely in a minority and are just as racist about other minorities as we look towards the majority being racist as well.
It's a human issue.
Yeah,
I grew up in South Africa and clearly... Yes.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah. I say this. That's probably the only word you can hear in my accent. But, it's clearly a country that had deep racism issues and still does. But I also know that the racism wasn't limited just to white people versus black people. There were other layers of racism amongst the different groups of the community. So, and I think that's true everywhere you go. I think it's actually about human beings being respectful, being compassionate, and never allowing it to matter unless it matters. So, for example, a positive discrimination might be,
It's so weird to hear that term, positive discrimination.
Well, I might, for example, be a company that provides bras that has to do bra fittings, and it's quite reasonable to say that men can't apply for that job.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
So that's just common sense kind of stuff. But unless we're talking about that kind of exemption, then I can't imagine why it should matter. It is literally the colour of our skin.
We've seen a lot of artists in America now, so Disney has been getting rid of some white singers who are singing the roles of black people, etc. in films. I think of some other ways around where characters who in Disney films who are cartoons that were white have been played by black people, and these things don't bother me, but it isn't about what bothers us personally, it's about what bothers other individuals, isn't it? And that's what we talk about with all sorts of employment law, is it's not about how the majority feels, it's about the minority. There's been an interesting development overnight with SBS, where an Indigenous cadet has come out saying that she had the worst time of her life being at SBS, which, as we know, is meant to be a wonderful place to work, as a multicultural place. And she said that she was always referred to as the Indigenous cadet by everybody there. She was never felt like she could ever put a story together for SBS News. She was never given the opportunity. And before she went in, she spoke about how great she felt about herself as a journalist, but when she left, it was quite the opposite. She was being told to speak proper English, for example, while working for SBS. And you think to yourself, how could this kind of happen? But even at institutions that are meant to be there to represent and to support, don't always hit the mark.
Well, I think the issue here, and there's conscious biases, absolutely, there's flat out discrimination, there's a lack of accountability, responsibility, compassion, all of that. And then there's a whole bunch of unconscious bias. So one of the saddest things I've ever watched is this video experiment of these little kids from many, many moons ago, I think in the 70s. And they were black children who were being presented with different types of dolls, white dolls and black dolls, and being asked which was the bad doll. Which was which was the good doll. And these African American children were pointing to the black doll and saying that one's bad. And then they were also asking them which one's most like you. And the look of confusion on these babies' faces just breaks my heart every time. So there are things like not having black princesses that tell little black princesses that they're not worthy. And so I think it's absolutely essential that the likes of movie producers, television people, lead by example and start making different choices that reflect who we really are as a community. And we're not all white.
No, absolutely. Karen Gately, always appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I know your program is coming up at the top of the hour.
Yes.
Black Belt Leader.
Looking forward to it.
All right, talk to you then.
Thank
Cheers.
you.